So Tom, I've been talking with clients and prospects often recently about the topic of budget and benchmarking, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And of course, budget and benchmarking in the realm of IT, cybersecurity, what to plan for in the future, what they should be doing now. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't get those questions often enough. I think it's something that every business owner should seriously look at the benchmarks for their peers in their industry and their peers, because there's always variations between different organizations, right? And so what we're talking about is a benchmark of what is a good budget for a law firm or an accounting firm or a financial institution of our size in our business. And that data is readily available. And why it's important is you probably don't want to overspend. Of course, don't forget, your firm is still unique in a lot of ways. Okay. And these benchmarks, these surveys are fairly broad. For example, banks, insurance companies, investment managers, financial services, they spend between 6 to 14% of their annual IT budget on cybersecurity. And their spending on IT itself, including cybersecurity, is going to vary between 9 to 16%. And it gets a little more specific than that when you get into law firms. What do law firms spend? I found a Rosenberg survey that actually says the average firm spends $5,700 per person per year on their IT budget. So what does that mean? Does that mean if you're only spending 5% of your revenue on your annual revenues on IT and cybersecurity that you're doing a fantastic job? No, it may not. And in fact, not nearly enough do people, managers and owners and shareholders really question if that's wise to underspend what their peers are spending. In other words, if you're only spending 5% of your revenue and your industry is averaging 10%, what are you missing? What's the gap in productivity? What's the gap in cybersecurity that you're not addressing? If it's in IT, you're not getting the productivity and efficiencies and customer service and many other things, many other metrics that factor into this. You're not spending what your peers are. So there's probably gaps in service delivery, productivity, and all of those things. So you need to know what those numbers are for your vertical market, your industry, law firms, accounting, and we do a lot of professional services firms. And so we're pretty familiar with that. And then budget out of that IT budget, cybersecurity. Personally, I would budget for cybersecurity separately than IT. We spend whatever we need to spend in order to be super secure. And because it's, the object of cybersecurity is to not have a security event or a breach or, suffer a serious significant attack, because it can be fatal to all sorts of firms, including ours. And so when we do our risk analysis, when it comes to cybersecurity, we're cognizant of those metrics, right? We know what the industry average is, but we have a tendency to err on the side of caution, which I think is good advice for anyone. Now, when it comes to IT, the things you want to think about is retiring equipment.
Yep.
And the really savvy businesses that we serve, they plan into their budgets to retire desktops maybe every 4 years, laptops maybe every 3 years, servers every 5 or 6 years, because they want to replace them before they fail, because they understand if they wait to save that extra couple of $1,000s that year, that they're going to have a productivity loss and they may be down, which could be a significant impact to a firm. So I think it's very important when you're talking to IT consulting firms, cybersecurity consulting firms, or MSP and MSSP, that you understand what those metrics are. And we can certainly help guide you for your industry, what you should be doing. And if you've got that gap, especially if you're underspending. Now, you can overspend as well. And sometimes there's a need for it. I would say, I didn't actually look at the numbers, but I would say that we probably overspend, but we are in the business, right?
Yeah.
And we certainly want to err on the side of caution, but it gets right back to the risk analysis. So if you want to directly correlate that to the risk analysis, when it applies to cybersecurity, if you're not spending what those benchmarks are for your peers in your industry, then you're probably underprotected.
Yeah.
You don't have all the right stuff in place. And so that's a signal that you really need to look into it and not just be clouded by the fact that I only spend 5% of our revenues on IT and just be thinking you're doing a great job.
Yeah. And I do want to touch on one point that you said about separating an IT budget and a cybersecurity budget. And some companies, and you talked about gap analysis, and some companies, they may have an IT budget, but cybersecurity hasn't even become a thought yet, or that's on the back burner. And so figuring out how to create that budget or now focus on cybersecurity and fill that gap that they have if they don't have anything in place is something that business owners are starting to think about a lot and experience. What's your thoughts on, hey, I have an IT budget, but I haven't even gotten to cybersecurity yet. What would you advise the first step for that to be?
Well, I would start with the benchmarks.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say, you got a IT budget, I don't know, $100,000. Well, basically you're going to be right around 10% of that needs to be spent on cybersecurity. So now set that separate budget apart for $10,000 a year. Okay. And then start a risk analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can figure out where the money is going to come from.
And that risk analysis is real important. So you're not just throwing money at random tools. You got to know what you need first so you can spend your money wisely.
Benchmarks are exactly that. That isn't just another aid in understanding that you're spending what you should be doing, what you should be spending. And yeah, absolutely. You don't say, well, all we've got is 10% of the IT budget for it. You've got to factor that with your overall risk profile. And those of you that haven't gotten enterprise grade security, you've got an EDR and you've turned on MFA and, you've got secure access service edge or VPNs and some of these are part of the IT budget as well. But I would carve those out and think of them separately because a VPN really doesn't improve productivity, right?
Yeah.
An antivirus really doesn't improve productivity. Productivity is a different objective than what security objectives are. So by segmenting those two things, I think it helps focus your mind and it gets you out of that habit of thinking that cybersecurity is an add-on to IT. It allows you to make it job one, which is what everyone should be doing. All of the leaders in the industries, all of the gurus in the industry and all of that, that's what they're doing now. They're making security the primary focus and then addressing IT second. They're plugging IT into security and security is the boss.
Yeah.
So it's all well and good to think about productivity and efficiency. You have to as a manager and a leader. But if you neglect the security component, you may one day suffer a catastrophic security event.
Yeah, and we were talking about security first. That security first approach is a new way of thinking, and that's something that we'll have to do a special on sometime soon. But if you all have any questions or concerns about anything we talked about or want to hear a specific topic, feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to do one soon.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.